Chaos Berries it is. Hey, everybody, it's Romania Black, and I'm going full-time fancy tonight as we have episode 23 of STEINS Gate. And considering that we're on Chaos Berries now, it seems only fitting that I get some blackberries up in this and we go a little bit fancy because, I don't know. I've got some information to share with you all that is making me question what in the world we're going to be doing this week with STEINS Gate. I'm highly concerned. So let's not waste any more time. Let's just dive right into it. Before we get started with the comments that have been brought up with the episodes 21 and 22, I did want to point out, I talked about it in the discussion, but went back, someone shared this over on the Discord. These are the screenshots from episode 1 versus episode 22. Wild. You have Ocarine looking mad scientist full of himself versus Ocarine that's seen like 22 episodes of shit. And things have gone down. The comparison is wild. I think the biggest thing is that Ocarine looks different, but Daru and Mayuri are the same. And that's crazy. That's crazy to me, right? So we have that. Then we had the comments for episode 21. A World Layer Observer said for episode 21, I just want to note that those alpha, beta, etc. are not the names of the world lines, but the attractor fields a world line belongs to, which is something the anime really should have explained better, in my opinion. It did explain the concept in episode 14 with the simplified rope analogy, but it didn't mention that they are called attractor fields. It's mostly a terminology thing, though it doesn't matter too much. Well, great minds appreciate when people explain things in detail. So thank you. I appreciate that. We're going to get a little bit more into that and my, how time travel works here in just a second. Anime 22 says, Kurisu reflects on her distant memories of watching Ocarine try time and time again to save Mayuri. Because of her conflict with her father and the isolation of being a genius, she never felt loved by anyone except for Ocarine and the friends that she's made. While she admires and loves Ocarine because of his love and loyalty towards his friends, especially for Mayuri, she's saddened she never felt like someone cared for her as deeply as Ocarine does Mayuri. And we'll talk about that with the English dub, since I watched the English dub for episode 22. I find that most people don't make this connection, and to be fair, it's not the first thing that would come to your mind, but I'm pretty sure Ocarine's unromantic kiss is the one between him and Moika. And as soon as they wrote this, I was like, oh yeah, that would count as the first kiss that was quite unromantic, so good on you for noting that. But then also I had to double check. In episode 1, around the 16-minute mark, when Ocarine calls Mr. Braun for the first time, he says, I told you, call me Tenoji-san. So way back in episode 1, I was like, when does this happen? Apparently at the 16-minute mark, back in episode 1, it occurs. So there is that. So thank you, Anime, for giving us the timestamp. Now, Alex Johnson said the reason for deleting the CERN message from the database is able to change the world line is because it's never been the D-mails themselves that change things. It's the actions people take due to the D-mails that causes the change. So for example, when Okabe sent the D-mail to Moika from his phone, she received it, but nothing changed, only because she takes orders from FB. It was only when Moika received the D-mail from FB's phone that she took action, which changed the world line. So, for CERN's database, the reason why Okabe's first D-mail changed the world line was because it was picked up by CERN's global monitoring system, and in the future, when someone from CERN sees that message, that's what makes them aware of the future Gadget Lab's time machine research, which leads to CERN using them to develop their own time machines in the future. So, the purpose of deleting the message from CERN's database was so they could remove it before anyone from CERN becomes aware of their monitoring system and picks up Okabe's first D-mail, which would alter the flow of time, where CERN doesn't end up developing a time machine. My only thing, and I want to say it before we get into this episode because Amane's in this episode and I'm like, maybe it's going to be explained, is and I wrote it on Whiteboard Coon for the discussion, but I'm going to look over at Whiteboard Coon for this. In the world line that we started out with in episode 1, Kurisu dies. So, by that logic, we know that Amane tells them that in the future, Kurisu is the mother of time machines. She helps CERN make the time machine. So I have theorized since the beginning that Amane is the one that has killed Kurisu. I questioned it last episode. I'm like, are we going to find out if it was Amane or was it somebody else? I've been saying that the whole time. We just don't know which it's going to be, and we might find out this episode. I don't know. But I'm like, if she went, we also established way back early on in the series that even if Amane went back and killed Kurisu, it wouldn't necessarily alter the timeline for her future. It would just create a new world line with a different future to go off of it, which I don't think Amane cares at this point. She just wants to change the future. But my thing is, if Kurisu wasn't in the timeline, then in that timeline they were in, if they'd stayed in that world line, then Mayuri would have lived, Kurisu would have died, but there would be no time machine. So how would Amane come back if there was no time machine? Unless the Amane that comes back is from a different world line that's hopped over to their world line, like Ocarine did when he sent that first D-mail. That's the only thing I can think of, but I'm still like, time travel makes my brain hurt, and I've had this like nagging headache all day, and I've taken medicine for it all day, and it's just not getting any better. So I'm like, why? But why? I'm like Ryan Reynolds, but why? So maybe we'll find out this episode. Maybe some things will help be elaborated upon, because I'm like, something's not adding up. Something's rotten in the state of Denmark. But I do appreciate Alex Johnson explaining that it's the actions that were taken around the D-mail, not the D-mails themselves, that have caused all the change, right? That is important to know. As far as the dub goes, the dub is amazing. The dub for this episode is wonderful. I mean, the actors, I've raved about them and praised them this entire time. I was telling people in the Discord, it's really like Death Note. I feel like Death Note and this series have both an amazing English dub that is definitely worth watching. I am glad I watched the Japanese sub though, because the English dub changes things. It changes translations. What I've been doing is I've been watching the English dub, but with the Japanese subs, so I can see what changes between the two. And there are changes. There are changes, some of which are of no consequence. You're like, well, you could interpret that way and it doesn't change the meaning. But there are some where there are some things left out that I'm like, ooh, I kind of wish I had heard that in the sub, so I would have had extra meaning with that context, right? So for example, when Ocarine goes back to the original world line, and he's having like his victory speech, he says the phrase, "a world not hamstrung by its tyranny," instead of saying, "a world chosen by STEINS Gate." And I feel like that translation, I was like, why wouldn't you say the STEINS Gate line? That seems pretty important. But he didn't do it in the English dub, so there's that. I also want to say that I liked Kurisu in the English dub at the beginning of the episode. She's like, well, whatever gets you through the night, dark elf. Like, her letting her dorkiness shine uninhibited is really interesting. And then the whole, like, what part of brain pudding didn't she get? Like, she's threatening to beat him up. But this line kind of goes back to what S Anime was saying, and I'm pretty sure they've drawn inspiration in their comment from this line from the English dub. She's like, I've never been that person to anybody. You're so determined. I had to help you. It was giving very much Wicked's I'm Not That Girl vibes. It was giving those vibes. But I'm glad that by the end of the episode that Mayuri knew that Ocarine loved her and she had the opportunity to say it back. And then Mayuri at the very end, she's like, well, it's okay. You can just be yourself. The bad stuff isn't going to happen to me now. I can tell. You can cry now. So did Mayuri know? Has she known all along? Does she know the timelines have changed? Is she privy to this information that Ocarine thinks he's the only one that would know? I'm curious. I'm so curious. Mayuri's the one that figured out Amane was Daru's daughter, so maybe that will come into play if she's involved in this episode. I don't know. One thing S Anime did say, and I want to clarify for next week and the week after, is when Amber Sandra, who thank you for giving me the files for these episodes to watch, I appreciate it. When I go to Amber Sandra's file folder, it shows 25 episodes. So I have been under the assumption that there are 25 episodes in the series. There are actually 24 episodes and an OVA, which is often called episode 25. And I'm like, oh, okay. And then there's a movie, and then there's STEINS Gate 0. So with that in mind, I am going to watch episode 23 this week, episode 24 next week, and I had on the books to do episode 25, which would be the OVA the following week. So we're not going to take a break in between episodes 24 and the OVA. We're going to keep those going. So there's that. But I just wanted to give you a heads up. That does change my perception, because technically that makes this the penultimate episode of the season, and next week's the finale. I thought we had 2 episodes to work with when really we have kind of 1 and then the OVA. So I'm like, what does that mean? What does that mean? So anyway, I've talked for 10 minutes. Thank you all so much for your comments and your kind words. I'm super excited to see what we get in this episode. But yeah, so let's not waste any more time. I have no clue what we're about to get, y'all, but we're going to find out. So we're going to start STEINS Gate episode 23, and we're going to do that here in 3, 2, 1, and I'll see you all on the other side. You know, I thought about halfway through this episode, I thought I was going to be mad. I thought I was going to be mad at this development, because it is really hard to top the emotional stakes of episode 22. It's really hard to top those emotional stakes. But I had a thought at the end of this episode. I was very curious about that thought. I feel, is it fine to feel slightly torn, but optimistically torn? I'm all out of faith. This is how I feel. I have thoughts about this episode. I went from okay to, oh, I don't like this, to, oh, this is absolutely horrifying, to, wait, what, to, how dare you, to, oh, okay, all right, this is where we're going, okay. And now I'm like, okay, well, I want to see where this goes, because we have one more episode, and then we have an OVA, and then we have a movie, and then we have STEINS Gate 0, which, STEINS Gate 0, what does that entail? Who knows, but I'm so curious. I am probably going to, I'm going to forewarn you all that I am going to speculate on many things and theorize many things. And many things that I'm about to write on Whiteboard Coon are theories, are me thinking out loud, are me going, well, could it be this scenario or the other scenario? And you all are free to comment down below. You are free to spoiler tag if you want to talk amongst yourselves. I just don't want to know anything about STEINS Gate 0. I don't want to know anything about the movie. I don't want to know anything about the OVA. I'm going to be reacting to those. So you will all get to see me reacting to those and talking about them very soon in the future. So I understand. I am very well aware that most of what I'm probably going to say in this episode will age very poorly. Will age very poorly. Like the decision to buy Blackberry Dr. Pepper. It's not the worst choice I've made, but as you notice, I'm not guzzling it down. It kind of is like, what if cough medicine was a soda? Is what the Blackberry Dr. Pepper tastes like, in case if you're curious. So yeah, okay, we're going to break this down. I had talked about the whole thing with Amane and how that made me go, well, how in the world? We're going to be talking about a lot of possibilities in this that have all come back and forth. I guess, look, time travel stories are not perfect. We understand that. I guess my biggest kind of like nitpick with this point in the story is that at one point, Suzuha says, you can't see yourself because it will cause a paradox. And one thing that I'm a little irked by, and maybe it's because of my own theorizing back at the beginning of the series, was that we talked about the theories that the beginning of the series, here's my issue. The beginning of the series, I know a lot of people will talk about part 1 of this season versus part 2. I've had some people say in the comments that they like part 2 because it like builds up the tension and then everything goes and starts to unravel and it's crazy and chaotic, and they say the first part of the season feels slow and methodical. Y'all, I love a slow burn. I can be slow and methodical all day long. But what I loved about the first set of episodes, the first half, is that it took all of this scientific theories and theorems and crafted the world building. So you're like, okay, well, this is what happens when we time travel. This is what happens when we do this. This is why this doesn't happen. So it seemed to me at the beginning of the series, like the whole paradox of, oh, if you see yourself, it's going to alter the future, that was just hokum. And instead, we were going to rely on some actual theoretical science to say that, no, what happens, it's not like Back to the Future where you go back and you could see yourself. That's not it at all. It's actually like these string theories and black holes and real scientific things. And I was like, oh, that's a cool way of looking at time travel through a very realistic lens. Nice. And I'm not saying that the second half of the series is bad for doing it, but it almost feels like the second half of the series becomes more of like an action show, and it becomes more of like, you know, with the violence and the gunshots and everything and the bloodshed, it feels like it becomes more of an action-oriented anime, and it starts to lose that adherence to the scientific principles in which it was founded. And my issue is, I'm not mad by the end of the episode because of Ocarina's character. That's what makes me hold on to this series, because Ocarina's character is fantastic in the last 3 minutes of this episode, and we're going to talk about it. But some of the science is seemingly, we're starting to like get a little more into cartoonism with the science and more into like the time travel tropes and the cartoonishness of it than the foundational science that we built the series off of. Does that make sense? I feel like maybe I'm crazy for saying that, but it feels we're more getting into like the TV show sci-fi time machine than the like theoretical physics that we looked at the beginning. Right? It feels like we've looked at time travel in two totally separate ways. And I can't decide if I like that or not. There's parts of it that I do like. There are parts of it that like, I'm like, man, I really wish the real scientific element of it. And I don't know if that's just the author is the creator of this series trying to have their cake and eat it too. Because you had a really bittersweet ending of Ocarina and Kurisu both executively making the decision together that they're going to save Mayuri by going and altering this world line. And there was that little sprig of hope where Kurisu's like, well, hey, in another world line, maybe I'm alive, and that's okay. It's not the last that you'll see of me, Ocarina. Another version of you will see me somewhere else. And there was something really sweet about this. And then we now have that we have to save Kurisu. And it's like, on the one hand, you would think that we, the audience, should be like, oh my God, yes, we're going to get to save her. But it also feels like we're retconning. It's cleverly done, but it's like, does that take away? Does getting her back take away from the emotional moments of episodes 21 and 22? I don't know. I guess it depends on what we end up doing. I have a theory about what we're going to end up doing, and I have like pros and cons with that, but we're not there yet. So we're going to stay with me. This discussion's going to probably be long and arduous, and I'm going to meander all over the place, but stay with me. Put me on 1.5 or 2.0 if you need to speed through. If you don't have an hour to sit through with me, just put me on speed, and I should not be on speed. I do not do drugs. My only drug is a caffeine addiction. That's the only vice that I have is caffeine, and it is pretty prevalent, as you can see. Could you imagine me on speed? No, thank you. No. Absolutely not. Don't do drugs, kids. They're not good for you. So we go back into this whole situation, and he's talking about World War III and explaining what is about to go down. And she makes the comment that this all starts where 5.7 billion people die. I think it's important to take note that we are dealing with two different Amanes, and that becomes very apparent the moment she shows up in the time machine. So we're just gonna get out of that. Not important. So what we have here is in the one world line, we had the idea that we're just going to ignore the world line that we start out with in episode 1 because apparently, well, I guess we can't. We need to go back to that. So we find out what ended up happening. What ended up happening, this is going to be a big old, long, arduous thing here, is at the conference, we find out that Kurisu ran into her dad. Now, her dad is the doctor who is giving the press conference. That is wild. That is crazy. That's such a twist. I'm like, oh my God, it was him. And the thing is, we're going to call this the OG world line. All right. We're going to call that the OG world line. We're going to come over here and do, this was the STEINS gate. We're going to call it the D-mail world line. This was the D-mail world line. In this world line, the conference was canceled. This may answer a bunch of my questions. All this up here I had questions about in the intro. This episode kind of answered those questions for me. So the conference was canceled. Because the conference was canceled, that's why Curry Sue lives. Because the conference was canceled, okay? That is why that ended up happening. She did not run into her dad, which explains why later on in this series, she laments her relationship with her dad. Now, one thing that I really like about this episode that it does rather well, it's a really cool callback to the idea of when Ocarine was like, well, hey, you and me, we're going to get together and we're going to go see your dad. And we're going to straighten this whole thing out. That's literally where we are in this episode. So it's like the fact of the matter is that Ocarine ends up being able to do that. That's so crazy. And I love that tie-in. That's freaking awesome, right? But anyway, so we know the conference is canceled and that allows Ocarine to meet Curry Sue. So, which the Ocarine from 15 years from now knows all this that has gone on. It's Ocarine from the future, so it knows him, right? But then again, the whole paradox of meeting yourself, that set everything into motion. We're going to talk about it. I'm like, that's where my brain starts to hurt a little bit, being like, but the science you established, we're just going to throw it out the window for the sake of the story making sense. But science be damned. I'm just like, okay, whatever. Anyway, at this point, so he met Curry Sue, and that led them to develop the phone microwave even more. And along the way, that led to meeting Amane, which led to meeting Moeka, which that whole thing with the original D-mail, we're going to put a little asterisk here, that D-mail notified CERN, right? Which them notifying CERN led them to come down here and throw Moeka, Amane, Ruka, and Ferris after all their D-mails. The idea was that Moeka came, killed Mayuri, but Mayuri was going to die anyway because Mayuri's the sacrifice instead of Curry Sue. It's like a coin. Are you going to flip it? Are you going to get heads or tails? Which one are you going to lose, Ocarine? Which one are you fine with losing? Can you have your cake and eat it too? STEINS gate is a choice. A choice means you have to pick one or the other, but maybe not. So maybe not, which is the end of this episode. Maybe you don't. So maybe there is no choice of STEINS gate. Maybe that's the point. That's what the joke is. And we're going to talk about that when we get to the end of the episode. But anyway, Mayuri gets killed, and that leads to the whole time leap machine. In one alternate line, it gets back to CERN, and we think that Curry Sue was... Here's the thing. Curry Sue developed... I'm going to put question mark, but she was killed. And here's the thing. In this timeline up here, this is where Amane in the D-mail world line is from. And in that, it's this dystopia where CERN is in charge. CERN, like the EU gets a hold of the time machine. So in this, they get a hold of it. And inadvertently, Ocarine leads a resistance, but dies. And Daru makes the time machine. And then Amane takes said time machine to go back in the past instead of going to 1975. But when they get to 1975 to try to get the whole IBM machine, it's a big old fail. And it causes the time loop that we get into now, right? And then that causes the whole time loop. So we end up having to go back to this timeline anyway. So that was kind of where we were with that world line there. Which, now that we see the other time machine, I want to get to the other time machine first, because that's going to be a thing. But in this one, Curry Sue runs into her dad. She ends up getting killed. And we find out what would have happened if that timeline had extended. On the one hand, Mayuri doesn't die. Here we go. But because she was killed, the dad, now we have Russia getting the time machine. The dad goes to Russia with her time machine paper. And from there, they develop this time machine war, and like space race breaks out, which leads to World War III, which leads to 5.7 billion people dying, and Ocarine, 15 years later, sends Amane back. Well, now, but here's where things get a little bit muddled, because Amane is from 2036, which is not 15 years in the future. No, that's not it at all. Amane, this is the part that gets a little interesting, is that 5.7 people end up dying. Amane comes back from 2036, but he said in the video he was from 15 years in the future. It's 2010. So she is getting him connected to Ocarine from 10 years prior, which is weird to me because he made the time machine this time around. He made it, but the video is 15-year Ocarine. So there's this weird discrepancy in the timeline where did these 10 years go? Because when he said 15 years in the future, I don't know if that is then he said he was 33. So if Ocarine's 18, 15 would have been 20. That wouldn't be right. If it was 33, if Ocarine was 19, that's 4. And yeah, it's 14 years ago. So yeah, so he was basically saying that it's not a typo. He said he was 33 years old there. But then she's from 2036, which is 25 years in the future, or 26 years in the future. So where's that 10-year discrepancy come from? Why is she connecting him to a video that he took 15 years in the future when she came from 10 years after that? Why didn't she send him a video of 25 years in the future where she's from? What? Why? I don't know. That part, we're going to put a big old question mark on that. But if we go back and save, here's what they want. They want Kurisu's death faked. Where is Ocarine getting a bunch of ketchup? Where's Ocarine getting 1,000 packets of ketchup within the next trial run? Did the little metal Oopa machines also give you ketchup packets? Do they go by the curry restaurant and grab a whole bottle of ketchup? How we doing this? But they want basically to fake Kurisu's death and then take her away? Take her to the STEINS Gate world line? Using the time machine? Is that possible? I don't know. I think they obviously want to fake her death. But then what does that do? What is the point? To what end? They want to make her seem dead. So I get the point of wanting to make her seem dead so that this Ocarine will stay in this trajectory to keep on having this happen. Delulu Ocarine, that is from 15 years in the future, as current Ocarine has noted, is, convinced that we have to keep everything going. He's played this long game. He's orchestrated and tied everything together. Now it's all going to work out. Do we trust Delulu Ocarine? I don't know. But let's go through this episode. We need to go. This is where it all starts. Now, as she says this is where it all starts, there are signs on the wall that say stop. I don't know. Here's my problem. Even with Amane being Amane, even with Suzuha being Suzuha, we as the audience have been conditioned to know from her in this world line that things don't always go according to plan. So we're going to talk about that in this episode, but do I fear that even though this is all seemingly okay, do I worry that it's all not going to work out? Well, yeah. Well, yes, absolutely. Why would you not think that, right? So yeah, so we get into this time machine. It looks about the same. It looks similar to the time machine that we saw at the beginning. it's the version C204, which is Christina, right? Here's my thing. I want to go back to episode 1. I'm going to get on my reactions here and go back to episode 1, okay? Because I could have sworn that in episode 1, we see her on the rooftop in episode 1. I think that we do. I'm going to turn the sound off of this so that y'all can't see this. Okay. Because from the beginning, I want to go back at the beginning. I mean, here I was complaining the entire time last week, being like, man, I wish we would go back to the very first episode like they said we were going to do. And then we did it in this episode. And I'm like, okay, I'm glad you guys didn't spoil that. Because we did end up going back, right? So, man, my hair was a lot different. My hair was a lot shorter back then. So, yeah, the inventor. And then, of course, when they say he's one of the greatest minds when it comes to time machines. And then, oh my God. So here's the thing. When you went to the conference, he was like, this guy's a joke. Because he is. Because Kurisu's dad is not the real thing. That's the whole point. She's the real thing. That's great. That's great. I love that. So, okay, it's like 2 minutes in. He goes to the rooftop, looks on there, and then he sees the time machine. It's the same time machine that we see from the beginning. And he looks out and there's somebody walking around. But it's somebody doing this with their hands? Is that Ocarine? Because it looks like they have like spiked hair doing this. They're doing that. And it looks like they have spiky hair and a hat on with gloves. So it doesn't look like a Monet. But he's like, what the heck? And then that's when his phone starts going off and he goes down to see Mayuri. So the question is, next week, are we going to see him put like a hat and gloves on and like give the sign to Ocarine to confuse him to where he'll like, that's the signal when he gets the text message to go see Mayuri? I don't know. Also, I wonder if it's a sign for a text to be sent to his phone from the past. I don't know. I don't know how they're going to work that out. But you can see some spikes of hair. So, like, is that Ocarine from the future? Is he wearing Daru's hat in that scene? Because it looks kind of like Daru's hat that he's wearing, but with gloves on. I'm so curious. Okay. I guess we'll find out next week. But yeah, I also want to make note that because Daru is like, who, father, what, when? Like, I felt a little bit bad for Daru in this moment because, you know, in this world line, Daru meeting his daughter is like this big deal. And it's this big emotional moment and they have the hug and everything. And now in this world line, it's too soon. He doesn't know her. They've not developed a relationship. So it's all just kind of like just surface level. Also, I like the way they show Amane as different is Amane does not look like the rebel that escaped from the ship going to Alderaan in Star Wars with like the ripped jeans and like the rogue rebellion shirt on. She looks like a tactical soldier, which I don't know what to make of that. But that's something to keep track of in the back of our mind. She looks really put together in this. I don't know what to think of that. At least Daru ends up with his future lover either way, so who's to say about that? But that's interesting. I don't know what to make about that with her outfit at all. I guess we'll find out. But what I wanted to say is, I feel like the one thing that is consistent is when Ocarine gets in the time machine with her, and he's like, wow, this time machine can go backwards and forwards in time, and it's really well done. She's like, well, of course, it's a time machine. That in itself shows the difference between the world lines, because in this world line, that to me signifies that in this world line, CERN ends up getting the plans and the device for the time machine. And we know that Kurisu and Ocarine end up dying and they're not able to work on the time machine themselves. So Daru is the one that makes the time machine. But Daru is a hacker. He's a hacker and good at computer like encryption, but he's not, I mean, he's good at fixing things and he's good to a point, but he's not the mind that Kurisu and Ocarine are. So it makes sense that his time machine would have more flaws, perhaps, than the time machine that Ocarine is creating in this world line. Plus, in this world line, it's a dystopia, and they're like in the middle of a conflict when it's being made, where here it almost seems like there are different countries, different superpowers trying to make time machines of their own in their own ways. That seems like a lot. I don't know. It's, or maybe they're both the similar conflicts. The dystopian future and World War III are similar conflicts. It's just Ocarine makes the time machine in this timeline, and it works better than the one Daru made in that world line. So I guess that's my point there of how they're different. And she's, okay, so she has the gloves on. She has the gloves on. So she's probably the one in episode 1 doing this, which is the signal. So what do we do with that? Why is she signaling to him? Maybe she's signaling to him that it's not time to go. I don't know. She clearly went back to cause this scene to happen so he'd go down and check his phone and see Mayuri. I mean, it's long game. They've all been orchestrating to have all this tie in together to make this happen. And it's just wild. So yeah. So I like the idea that Okarine's like, no, I am not going back with you in a time machine. Did you not? I've just went through the whole series where things have gone wrong. No. And he's like, I'm not. I came here from this one world line. I made all of this attempts. I'm not going back. I altered the world line over and over these past 3 weeks, only to make this the world line by sacrificing Kurisu. No, absolutely not. I'm not going to let it all go to waste now. And I was proud of him in this moment. I was like, yes, good. And Mayuri's like, well, who the hell is Kuryu-san? And Daru's like, well, isn't that person that was stabbed? I think it's amazing that Amane went from somebody that didn't trust Kurisu in this world line and was constantly wary of her to this world line's Amane being like, well, actually, we need to save her, buddy old pal. Like, what? Me animosity towards her? When? Never. And she's like, but people are going to die. What if I told you avoiding a world war requires preventing Makise Kurisu's death on July 28th, 2010? Which, that's just so cruel. That's so mean. To make him go through all that and then to tempt him like the damn devil being like, but what if we could go back and stop it? I'm like, that is causing a whole nother time loop, like with Mayuri. Why would you want... I'm at least glad that I'm not glad that it happened, but just like him starting to leer at her, I'm glad the whole stabbing situation, which was absolutely batshit insane, I'm glad that happened on the first go-around, the first time, than for him to have repeated like it was with Mayuri. That would have been overkill, and I would have been like, oh, no. But we're going to get there. And so she's trying to convince him. She's like, I have one mission, which is to rescue Makise Kurisu and go to the only world line free of attractor field interference. So we established that there is supposedly how this is going to be prevented. And I'm going to go over here. This doesn't make sense to travel here. Is that there is one world line, conveniently, that is free of a attractor field interference. And attractor field interference is what we establish is like the time loop. It's free of time loops. You can't create a time loop in it. Like what happened with Mayuri is the attractor field interference. And she calls this world line is called STEINS Gate. Now we'll go back to this, but I was like, doesn't that seem rather convenient? But maybe that's the point. We're going to go back to it. I'm like, what? So then we have the OP. Let's get out of the OP. This episode is called Open the STEINS Gate, which, all right. So he's like, really, STEINS Gate? He's like, that made up thing. He's like, your future self came up with this plan. Along with my dad. And Daru's like, who are we talking about? She's like, it's entirely conjecture. So this entire plan is thought up by Daru and Ocarine. Okay. To go to take Kurisu to this world line that cannot be a time loop. Okay. Yeah. And Okarine's just not having it. And I appreciate him not having it. She's like, I'm going anyway. I'm going to bet on the unknown chance that a bright future awaits. And if you have it to come with me. And Ocarina's like, no. She's like, then take my hand. And I don't blame Ocarina for just being like, we just got through these shenanigans. It's not been a day. It's not been a day. It's August 25th, 21st. He's like, which granted, I guess it has been more than a day. It's been almost a month, but still, that's just, he's like, can I not go a month without having to worry about this sort of thing? I do love the building and like the shadows and everything playing with the light here on the roof. It's really good. And Mayuri's like, I don't get what's going on. This is the part that got me, is that after everything that happened over the last how many episodes, where every single character, Ruka, Faris, Kurisu, Moika, they all were like, hey, I don't really know what's going on, but if it helps you save Mayuri, I'll sacrifice my dreams to make it work for you. And for Mayuri to now make it her turn to go, hey, I don't know what's going on, but, you know, if it's worth saving your friend, then yeah, let's go do it. I'm like, do you know what you're saying, Mayuri? That is insane. She's like, I think you should try. And Daru's like, well, this World War III stuff sounds like a lot of your crazy delusions. You're probably the only one who can handle this. I'm like, everybody's pushing him to do this. And he's like, are you freaking kidding me? He's like, are you freaking kidding me? He's like, after everything I went through, you're gonna push me to do this? Is that so? I don't blame Ocarina for crashing out. He's like, I don't care about the 5.7 billion, but I care about saving Makase. Which, that's on brand. That's on brand. Ocarina, back in this world line, was like, you know, I don't care about the dystopian future and saving that, but I'm going to save Mayuri. And here, it's back to Ocarina being like, I don't care about the 5.7 billion people. I just care about Kurisu. I'm like, did Isayama watch this series and go, I could take that and work with it? By the end of this episode, the energy that Ocarina was giving off, I was like, not to spoil Attack on Titan, but I was like, that's giving some Jaeger energy right there. That's a Jaeger bomb right there. I'm like, it all was connecting, and I'm like, are you freaking kidding me? I guarantee Isayama watched this show and was inspired by it. He's like, Gold, climb on in. And he's like, oh, this can carry two people. I like that her little braids. Here's the thing. Her little braids are done up, but what is with the bandana that is black and red? The black and red on the bandana, I'm like, is that supposed to be indicative of, because every time we've seen Kurisu with like at the scene of her death, there's that like red line of binary numbers. Is that supposed to represent the red line on the bandana? And then, you know, the red thread that was on his jacket, is it supposed to be indicative of that? What does that represent? I'm curious. Maybe we'll find out. Who knows? And she's like, well, yeah, just come on in. And so he does. I feel bad that Daru is played off kind of as a comedic character in this moment, because it took such a sentimental moment early on in the series and just plays it for laughs. But at this point, what can you do? And Mayuri takes his cell phone. This part here where she's like, oh, we don't want to create a time paradox. I'm like, I feel like I guess maybe also she didn't want to go ahead and say it, but they didn't want the phone interference, because later when the video works, we'll talk about that video working later, I guess they didn't want to risk something messing up with that, so he kept his phone with Mayuri. That's the one thing that made me go, okay, he left his phone with Mayuri. He's probably coming back to this world line one way or another. So there we go. But yeah, so they go back in the past. This tech is a lot more advanced than the tech in the old time machine. And yeah, my one thing that made me kind of be like, are you freaking crazy? Is that after everything we went through to get Mayuri back, after everything that Ocarina went through, all of the trials and tribulations and horrors that man went through, after all of that, you mean to tell me that this bitch didn't give Mayuri a hug? A hug? Before, what if he went to the past and it changed everything? We've talked about butterfly effects. We've talked about all this. This in itself is a butterfly effect, because you have a whole different future than you did in the other world line. Like, what? You mean you went through all of that and got to see Mayuri, and then we don't get an on-screen hug between Mayuri and Ocarine, like him being like, hey, if I screw things up in the past and it changes the future where I don't see you again. Like, what? And it didn't even have to be a hug. It could have just been like a meaningful look at Mayuri to be like, sorry that I spent all this time getting you back, but now I'm possibly going to potentially undo everything I just did. Let's hope it works out. I was just kind of floored by that, honestly. But anyway, and also when Amane's like, oh yeah, these little like fairy dust particles, little bits of time, isn't that neat? I'm like, no, those time spores would freak me the F out. I'd be like, no, this is like sand in an hourglass. Nope, get me out of here, get me out of here. I would, no, I would not be getting the warm fuzzies about all that. So here's the thing. They get into the time machine, but the world line doesn't change. We're still in the same world line. We're still in the same. We just went back to July 28th. All right? And so she gets out. He gets out with her. I mean, I don't blame him for throwing up as soon as he gets out. And then she, like, unlocks the door and says, try not to run into your other self. It'll cause a major time paradox. That's what I'm talking about. We kind of established early on in the series that wasn't a thing that even happens. That's just like, that's the hokey, like, fairy tale time machine of, like, TV and movies. And that the actual time travel is much more complicated and abstract and, like, all this. But here, she's like, now, don't see yourself. It'll cause a time paradox. And I can't decide if it's just the writing of the series. It's either one of two, it's one of three things. Either it was never as not hokey as it was in the beginning, and I was just giving it more scientific clout than it deserved, but I don't think that's the case. Two, it's just kind of a little bit sketchy writing for the third act because we're making this a plot point now instead of just tying up and having a bittersweet ending because we can't do that. Or three, she was just saying it's going to cause a time paradox so that he wouldn't run into his former self and he took her seriously so that it would all pan out like it was supposed to for this failed attempt, so that when they went back and Ocarine's video magically worked, then it could be explained. Which sounds a bit contrived, but I understand if that was her goal, was to keep him from running into himself, to make sure that the future in question happened. I'm willing to go with that option. If it's just bad writing, then I don't know. But it's just like, what can we do at this point, you know? So anyway, she goes back, they go to the conference, and he basically ends up going back where he was. I do love that he goes back through all this point. I'm glad that we tie up from the beginning. It's so wild to go back to the same places we were at the beginning. It's so crazy. And yeah, they're talking about going up. And that's when he runs into Kurisu. That's when he runs into her. So and he wants to tell her something like it was in episode 1, but he didn't do that. And so then she went and saw the Ocarine of what ends up being this world line, says, oh yeah, I just saw you. You tried to tell me something, but you couldn't say it. It all has to add up. It all has to add up. Then she went to the closet, and that's where she got stabbed. And Ocarine would not know that. So, yeah. But anyway, it's so heartbreaking because he sees her. My only other thing, and it kind of gets explained in this episode as well, because at first, whenever she had the documentation about the time machine, I was like, well, okay, oh yeah, there's Amane with the hat. There's Amane with the hat. Never mind. There we go. Because when he comes back to her, she's like, can you? And he's like, yeah. She's like, I should mention it'd be dangerous to take her outside. So without her knowing who killed her or how she died. Okay. So basically, Amane's setting this whole thing up. She's setting up and tricking him to going through with all of this. She's like, oh, don't just grab her and bring her out here. That would ruin everything. Because he has to fail once in order for the next part to work, which is diabolical. Diabolical for you to manipulate yourself. That is Delulu land. But it's Ocarine. I'm not surprised. But basically, she was like, you can't just bring her out because we have to fake the death. But you can't fake the death until you see what happens and believe. It's just setting up a long game. This is like 3D chess manipulation, right? we should assume her death is an inevitability. And he's like, just like with Mayuri. So yeah. And then that's when she goes up there to see what's going on with him yelling in the room. And she knows it's her dad. Now the question is, she brought him out of the room while her dad was in there talking, but didn't stop to talk to her dad. So that part makes me kind of weirded out, I guess. She grabs him and drags him off, but the dad doesn't say anything, knowing that that's his daughter in the moment. So that's weird. I don't know what to make of that, if that's like... But then he goes to look for her later, so I guess that's what leads him to find her in the closet, because he hides in there. Okay. Now, she has this paper that she's reading, and I wanted to comment about it. He's like, that's why she's key to changing the world lines. Okay. Because she's looking at the paper and he's looking at her looking at it. What does it say on there? I wanted to see what the draft said. What is she reading? Time Machine, a study of creation. So, I guess to this point, my only question, going back to like the first couple episodes, is that she had a manuscript on building a time machine from the start. Allegedly. That she brought with her to the conference to give to him, to offer them co-authoring this theory and selling it that would make the time machines. That's where she started it from, right? In this world line, because she doesn't go to the conference, the thing that got me was that she started out the episode saying that, in like episode 2 and 3, saying that time machines were stupid and were not possible, and that it was all a bunch of hokum. But originally what the show was trying to say is that, oh, well, she was just joking. She didn't actually believe that. She really believed in the time machines. She was trying to get her dad to help her publish, but because she didn't see him in this world line, she was disillusioned from that and tried to deny it for a while until Ocarine got her to get on board with it again. And maybe that does make sense. That does check out, I guess, because she does end up then helping him. And I remember early on in some of the early episodes commenting, being like, wow, for a girl that doesn't really like time machines, she's sure good at coming up with these theorems. Now it all makes sense. She actually did believe it from the start. Her dad just not being there to converse with her about it kind of disillusioned her from it. Also, whoever her mom is, she got all the looks from the mom's side. She does not look like the dad at all. At all. There's like no part of her, not even her hairline, eyebrows, eyes, not a thing. Nothing looks like her dad. So unless it was the milkman, she took everything from the mom. Go figure. And Ocarine's like, you mean it was this guy this whole time? So they get in a kerfuffle. Her dad ends up being a lot crazier than he looked. And girl was really not being as, I don't know, maybe it's because she hadn't seen him in a while, but I'm like, girl, you really went easy on describing him. He's a bit cray-cray. Mm-hmm. I was like, you really were describing him relatively easily, especially when Ocarine's like, let's go visit him sometime. I'm like, how would that have gone? Because he was ready to strangle her. And then Ocarine steps in. I'm surprised that Ocarine in the other room, at first I was like, did he hear? Is he going to come running? But her scream is what notified him the first time. Ocarine kind of yells in this scene, but it's not like as loud, so maybe it didn't draw his attention as quickly. And then, yeah, man came with a switchblade. I was like, what the fudge? And then the moment that box dropped early on, that screwdriver fell out, I was like, there was like a little glint, a little sheen to the screwdriver. And I'm like, oh, that's what he's going to stab her with. But then he pulled out the knife and I'm like, oh, well, maybe not. Maybe Ocarine's going to take the screwdriver and stab him with it. That's not what ends up happening. What ends up happening is that Ocarine gets the knife from him. He gets the screwdriver. Thank God Kurisu could at least defend herself a little bit. And then what happens? She has him and his screwdriver, and she like sees and pushes him aside to get out of the way because she doesn't want her dad getting stabbed. Like, Ocarina was ready to kill that man. Back in this world line, he's like, let's go visit him. Let's go visit him and have tea. This world line, he was like, I'm about to kill your dad. We're about to have some patricide. And then she knocks him out of the way, and what does he do? He stabs her instead. I was like, time and space has it out for Ocarine. Time and space does not like Ocarine. I'm curious, we saw this in this moment when he stabs her. There's this line, this red thin thin thread of numbers and like BC and like 1s and 6s. I'm curious why we see that red thread again, if it's just the thread that's connecting their fates together, if that has anything to do with the black and the red bandana that Amane has on. I don't know. But, oh, it's rough. And then the dad takes the time machine manuscript and runs away and gets on a flight to Russia like you do. And then he holds her as she dies in his arms. I think I was more in shock in this moment because I was like, are you kidding? And I was so curious because I'm like, okay, she just died. Now we're getting the Mayuri treatment with Kurisu. It's all two sides of the same coin. I'm like, is Ocarine just going to be like, F it, and just absolutely lose his mind and lose his marbles? Is that what's going to happen? Is this our cautionary tale to not mess with science? Don't do it. Don't mess, well, not mess with science, but don't mess with time travel. Don't do it. Also, him coming out, crashed out, just like mumbling to himself about killing Kurisu. At that point, I was like, okay, the cautionary tale is that we don't mess with time travel. We don't do that. We've now learned the hard way. What are we doing with this? And so then she is like, well, we'll just start again. We'll just start over again. I don't blame him for freaking out. I would freak out too. And what gets me is that we have the text message. The text message that was from originally... I like the one says Mayuri want chicken tendies. Chicken tenders, chicken tendies. The email to him that's from the SGEPK is the one from John Teeter. And that's a cool callback because now we know it's actually Amane's cell phone. It's like her future cell phone. Look at that. Look at that. Look at that callback. And it says, turn on the news. So it was sent from the 21st to here. Okay. And then they do that and find out that he went over to Russia with the time machine. So yeah, she's like, this is all part of the plan, right? And she's like, we'll just go back. And he's like, no. And he's like, I'm done. And I don't blame Ocarine. He's sitting there covered in the blood of the woman he loved after he literally stabbed her. Your mental capacity would be just kaput. Like, bye, done, sayonara, was nice to know y'all. It's been real. And then, like, I don't blame him for just absolutely losing it. I don't. And the moment where he's like, I'm just going to stop. I've had enough. I'm going to quit. And then Mayuri slaps him, just like Kurisu slapped him. I was like, oh my God. I kind of wanted Mayuri to lose it a little bit more, but I'm glad she didn't. But I was like, oh, I mean, to be fair, there was a part of me that was really torn. Because on the one hand, after everything that's happened to him, our boy just deserves a nap. He just deserves to sleep. He deserves a nap. He deserves to not have to suffer anymore. Okarine's been through like the ringer so many times. I understood where he was coming from, but in hindsight, after seeing this, if he had just walked away and hadn't gone back to save her, and it did cause World War III in the future, he would have always regretted it. And also, but also, like, would have been absolutely miserable. And I am glad that Mayuri snapped him out of it. Although, what we basically end up getting is the idea that Ocarine being absolutely, like, miserable, like Misery Ocarine, becomes the Delulu Ocarine from 15 years in the future. So, I mean, this is where I'm talking about the time paradox. This is where I'm talking about, because the first part of this series set up such a good job of explaining that there are all these different world lines. I'm going to have to back up here. There's all these different world lines, and every time you change, it just kind of splinters off into these other world lines as well. And so you end up with these like infinite different world lines. I want to say that it feels like with this development, while it is the really cool, like, oh, Ocarine's been playing the long game and it's leading to this whole thing. Like, unless this Ocarine is from a different world line, communicating with an ocarine of the past to try to give that ocarine a good future. I feel like some of the science is lost at this point for the sake of it being like a really cool twist. And I'm not mad at the twist. I'm not mad about it. It is noticeable, is all I'm saying. I'm not mad at it. Especially the end of this episode. I really like the end of this episode. I'm just kind of like, the science we set up from the beginning, this kind of flies maybe in the face of it. I don't even know. It just feels a little bit like it. But I like the metaphors and the symbolism enough that I'm going to give it a pass. At least for now. Who knows? We may have something else revealed in the future. And Mayuri says, you helped me. You didn't give up on me, and that helped me to move forward. And one thing that I do, as much as I'm like, you mean to tell me we fought for Mayuri this whole time, and now we're going to go fight for Kurisu. I have thoughts. My one thought is, if we save Kurisu, and cause time seems like, I don't know if you all have watched other time travel things, it feels like when you mess with time messes back with you. Like, oh, okay, bitch, you're going to save them? Well, then here's what we're going to do. And I guess this whole STEINS Gate world line is supposed to be the answer to that question. But to me, I'm like, but we saved Kurisu and it led to Mayuri dying. So now if we save Kurisu over here, is it going to do the same thing? Who is time going to accept as the sacrifice? And I thought for a second it was that Ocarine was going to be the sacrifice. It's like, if you sacrifice yourself, Ocarine, you can save Mayuri and Kurisu, the two women that you love, by sacrificing yourself. That would be kind of poetic, but I don't know. It definitely feels like the show wants to have like the happy ending of Ocarine and Kurisu being able to be together. And this moment here, like 20 minutes in or so, or at this point, how long are we in? Like 17 minutes in, makes it seem like Mayuri's like, hey, I'm letting you move on now. You saved me. I'm going to be able to live my life. I'm going to be okay. I'm going to let you go. You and Kurisu go be together because I know that you love her. And I'm fine with that. It's just such a wild turn from us spending all this time to save Mayuri for now Mayuri to give him her blessing that he can go to another timeline. So, okay. As far as why the video not working back in episode 1, I like the twist that now the video will work and play now that you failed once. Although it does seem a little hokey, a little wee bit contrived. Maybe it's just that the right mouse traps had to be done in a certain sequence so that the video he planted back then would be able to work once certain fulfillments had been required. Maybe this Ocarine had researched that world. Maybe this Ocarine, the Ocarine from the future seems like he knows everything from all the past Ocarines. So maybe he researched enough to have researched the world lines and know, okay, if this happens in this world line, he'll be able to open up the video. Maybe. It seems a little contrived, but I'm going to have faith in the show. They've been able to explain things really well so far, so we're going to see. I like that we don't get to see Ocarine's face. We just get to see him a little bit. We see the back of his head, and that's enough. Which he's only 33 at the time, so, and we see it looks like the time machine behind him. That looks like the time machine right there. Yeah, it seems like, I mean, Ocarine's only 33, so he wouldn't have aged too much. He probably just has some, like, crow's feet. And so then he starts talking to him in the video, where he explains, if you've opened this message, then it means you failed to rescue Kurisu. And it must have been painful for you. I don't know. The way he said that, though, was very much a broken man's, like, oh, that must have been painful for you. I'm like, that's the man of a man that's been desensitized saying that. That's what that gave me the vibes of. He's like, that pain gave me determination. So he's like, I couldn't afford to undo it. So that's why he's like, I had to create this version so it would allow me to go back. He's like, it helped pave the way, you could say. But now we can move to the real focus of our plan. He's like, I had to let this all go down. I mean, I was sacrificing 5.7 billion people in the process, but I had to do that so you could be able to go back and change the past and save those people. So it was all worth it, right? He's like, the plan is to save Makise Kurisu and enter Steins Gate. So Steins Gate is supposedly the worldview, the world line that is kind of like off in another dimension, another dimensional plane. Why am I getting Wicked Part 2 vibes from this? All I can think of when he says save Kurisu and enter Steins Gate, I'm like, I'm going to give some Wicked Part 2 spoilers right now. So if you don't want to hear Wicked Part 2 spoilers, just wait till I'm done waving my arm and then you can come back to the video. Is Wicked Part 2, in Wicked Part 2, Elphaba and Fiero go into like this little pocket dimension, like at the end of the movie, where they can like just roam in the desert and be free and do their own thing. I was thinking of that, and I was also thinking of Batman Rising when Bruce Wayne and Alicia and Anne Hathaway like go off and go into their little like French vacation away from everybody, and Alfred sees them at the end of the movie and he's like, you guys did escape and got to live your own lives. Is this that? Is Steins Gate, the Steins Gate world line, going to be like that little pocket dimension where him and Kurisu are going to roam off together and go have endless sex in Steins Gate realm? Is that what's going to happen? I mean, Mayuri would give them their blessing if they did. Mayuri would probably give them their blessing if they did, but... And then that would solve the problem, because if they both leave and go to the Steins Gate world line together, then they can't make the time machine, which means that the dystopian future and the World War III won't happen, so it'll solve all the problems. The only downside is poor Daru and Mayuri won't be able to see them anymore. So, but yeah, that seems to be what we're about to do. And he's like, there are two conditions. You have to destroy the paper on time machines, so the time machines aren't created. And that Dr. Nakabachi takes to Russia. So yeah. And you have to save Makise Kurisu. But the clincher is, he's like, the thing is, you have to avoid altering her death and altering the past. So essentially, you have to create an illusion. Not that Okarine's ever created illusions before. Not that he's ever made up stuff before. It's possible. You're going about it the wrong way. He's like, you basically can alter the timeline. Just make sure that past you doesn't know you've altered the timeline. And then it'll work, right? Yeah. And he's like, you must not alter the established past events. You can see him like in front of all these computer screens. You must not undo what your first self saw. Because that's going to set everything in motion for this to even work. Doing so would alter the past and all would be lost. That was my thing. When he talks about altering the past, I'm like, well, but it wouldn't alter the past according to the science at the beginning of the series. It would just create a separate, reality. But we apparently don't want to do that. So, think back to the experiences on the Alpha World line. It was only 3 short weeks, but you should have memories of the time you spent with Makise Kurisu. So, one of the many sacrifices you both made were trying to save Mayuri. So, and then that point, he's like, all the time you spent adrift in those world lines. I like adrift. That's a good thing. It cannot go to waste. You must not undo it. Yeah, I do like the idea of you can't change anything you've learned along the way, because that's helped set up to where you are now. It's very like the River song, not one timeline needs to be altered, not one. It's because of that journey across countless world lines that you're here hoping to save Kurisu. That's why I've devoted everything in developing a time machine to lead us to this point. You've only managed to get as far as you have because of our shared wish to save her. So trick yourself. I love it. Save Kurisu without changing the fact that she died. Fool yourself. Love me. I would just like, I want the Cardigans' Love Fool to play. Say that you love me. Like, yes, fool me, fool me. Convince your past self that she's alive. Do so and the past won't change. But the future will. And I like that they're both like, well, what's going on? He's like, I'm sure you understand. Incidentally, the time machine is a type C204. I doubt I need to tell you what the C stands for. And it's Christina. I also was the one who named the target world line Steins Gate. I'm sure you know the reason for that name too. And he's like, it doesn't mean anything. Isn't that right? So, I mean, I guess that's to say that he's wanting to create a timeline where you can have your cake and eat it too, right? Which is funny because the whole thing has been the choice of Steins Gate, but he's wanting to create a world line where the choice doesn't matter, right? Or not, I don't want to say it that way, but where there isn't necessarily a choice. It's like the happy ending world line. I guess the happy ending world line is Steins Gate. But yeah, it doesn't really mean anything. I feel like that's great because all of these memories, Ocarina has had these memories from start to finish. So is Ocarina starting to remember things that future Ocarina knows? I don't know the answer to that question. But he's like, and now I'm going to outline your final mission, Operation Scold. Have we had Scold? Has Scold been in a line? Has that been a thing? Norse mythology, it's debt or obligation. Sharing etymology with the English should is a Norn in Norse mythology. Skuld makes up a trio of Norns that are described as deciding the fates. The three fates! Oh! And appears in at least 2 poems as a Valkyrie. Well, we've had those words in this. Also, yes, I feel like the 3 fates are Ocarina, Mayuri, and Kurisu. They're the 3 fates. And we've seen so far Mayuri and Kurisu using thread to sew something, like to sew the fates. So now we need Ocarina to be the sewer, to sew together the threads of fate. I love it! Yes, yes, please, yes, please. And it said in the poem, Skuld is mentioned in a 13th century poem. She saw Valkyries come far and wide, ready to ride to, I'm not saying that word because I'll get it wrong. Skuld held a shield, and Skogul another, Gunnar, Hildur, Gondel, and Gerskogul. So I like the idea of a shield. Ocarina having a shield to shield Kurisu. Oh, it's genius! Love it, absolutely love it. Yes, yes, please. Your final mission is Operation Skuld. So the final mission is to rescue Kurisu and run off to your happily ever after world. You have to change the outcome without altering the established past events. I love that he has the same clothes on 15 years later. He observed Kurisu on the ground soaked in blood. So you must change the outcome without altering the established events. Is this next to the computer? Is this next to the TV that it was in the lab? Deceive your original self. Deceive the world. Again, Isayama took reference. That is the only way you can reach Steins Gate. You have to deceive the world to reach paradise. I'm telling you, there's a deceive the world to reach paradise? Like Attack on Titan what? Oh my God, it's so true though. Yep. And so they record it in an absolute balance. Good luck. El Sai Kongru. I love it! Also good to know at 33 he still hasn't shaved that beard, right? I love the connection back to El Sai Kongru. Amazing. Like, it's been there all along. Also, Mayuri was totally crushing on older Ocarina. I love it. I love that she's like, yes, please. I don't blame her. And then him this is the thing. This felt so like, he's like Operation Skuld. El Sai Kongru. I still act like that when I'm 33. I love him laughing. It's so fun. I've gone full on delusional. But I love his smirk. He's like, I'll do it. If that's the choice of Steins Gate. Oh, I love it. Yes, I'm the mad scientist, Hoenn Keoma. I'm glad Hoenn Keoma's back. I missed him. I was going to be sad. He's like, fooling the world is nothing to me. And then when he just laughs, I freaking love it. I love it. I miss the old Ocarina. I'm with Mayuri. I did miss him. Yep, he's like, I'll say it again. If I am the mad scientist. Hoenn Keoma. Yep. And then the hand up next to the sun, grabbing it, the world is in the palm of my hand. Well, maybe we still gotta think of a way to get Kurisu to appear dead and fool yourself without her being dead. I I mean, basically, Ocarine from the future is asking him to take everything that he knows about her. You've been around her. You know everything about her. You know how she thinks about things. Use that to convince her to fake her own death around her dad. Use that to your advantage. Do what you will. But then it's like, what do they do after that? How's that going to work? And how are you going to store the manuscript? So, and what is exactly, how are you getting to the Steins Gate world line? How's that all going to work? I guess we're going to find out. Okay. I was really, up until the very last part with Ocarine coming back to himself and being the mad scientist Hyo and Kiyoma again, I was on the fence with how I felt about this turn of events because of the reasons I've told you all about in this discussion. But it feels so good to have him back. It feels so good to have Delulu Ocarine back in this, and to have the delusional self have a purpose now, and for it all to come back and kind of tie up together is really clever, and I like it. I want this series to stick the landing, and I know we have a movie still to go, so I don't know. I'm at this point, I'm like, okay, well, are we going to be able to solve all the problems in one episode next week? Probably not. But then we have an OVA, and I'm like, well, maybe we could solve the problems in the OVA. But then that leaves like, what the hell are you going to do a movie about? How are you going to have a movie? And then obviously Steins Gate Zero, I'm like, well, then what is that? So I'm sitting here being like, but what? How can, it feels like we're at the end and we still have another like series to go. I'm like, what? So yeah, I don't know, y'all. I'm so interested. I'm so intrigued. So, yeah, I'm on board to find out what we're about to do. So let's see. So anyway, I hope you all enjoyed this reaction and discussion. I feel all over the place with this, but maybe now that Whiteboard Kun has been just decimated this episode, I'll be interested to see in what goes on next week. So anyway, I hope you all have a wonderful week. Please stay safe, take care, and yeah, I'll be back very soon with more of Steins Gate. And I'll see you then at the season finale. Yeah, let's go.